Okay, before we get the episode started, I just wanted to highlight the fact that the Evan Hawk podcast was nominated for Your Money Geeks annual Top 10 Star Wars Podcast Awards. So, after a month of nominations, Star Wars fans have spoken, and now it's time for you to vote for your favorite Star Wars podcast. And if you wish to vote for the Evan Hawk podcast, the link is in our bio, and we are incredibly grateful for you guys nominating and voting for us. Voting goes until April 30th, so throughout the whole month. It's a fun ride, and yeah, it'll be great to see. So thank you for your nomination, and thank you for the vote. It's an incredible honor to be included among such great company, and I wish we could all win.
Hello there, this is Cassia.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to the Evan Hawk, a podcast discussing Star Wars news and Knights of the Old Republic.
Spoiler alert for the Knights of the Old Republic series and the Star Wars films, TV shows, and all other media.
This is where the fun begins. All right, so this episode, we are pitching the first KOTOR movie, and it's going to be really fun, and I'm really excited.
Yeah.
What would it be your elevator pitch for the first KOTOR movie?
So, if you're trying to sell this as a movie, right, you just want to say, okay, I want to do a film adaptation of Knights of the Old Republic, and yeah, I think it would be great. It's, kind of an unexplored area in film in the Star Wars universe. It has really compelling characters, a lot of different locations, some familiar, some new. It's going to kind of broaden the universe, be a really good starting off point for new fans coming into it. It's going to adapt really well to screen, and the story, plays out really well.
Yeah, so I think I would describe it, and I feel like somewhere my old professor, when I took a screenwriting class, is going to be mad somewhere. Like, I'm not pitching it well enough, but my rough draft version was a hero's journey is taking place in an all-new era known as the Jedi Civil War. The protagonist will have to escape a fortress, train as a Jedi, and help a world reclaim its sovereignty. And then I was like, no, it's a little bit too busy, not quite fun enough.
Right, sure.
Yeah, so then I was like, an epic tale in leagues of the legends of King Arthur plays out with hints of the Bourne identity in a galaxy far, far away during a time of warfare between the Jedi and Sith. And my elevator pitch didn't quite maybe highlight the fact that it's not just a couple of Jedi and a couple of Sith fighting, but it's like a whole, like, legions of Jedi, legions of Sith, but...
Right, yeah.
You want to kind of highlight that it's an epic and kind of like a romance in the old sense,
Yeah, definitely.
So,
definitely.
Yeah, so what would you title the first episode in a KOTOR cycle? Would you do it episodes or like 1, 2, 3 or what?
I think I'd probably like to steer away from episodes. We had episodes 1 through 9, so I think going in a little bit different direction is how I would choose to do it for myself. So if I was coming up with a title, I'd want to think of something that kind of encapsulates the the feeling of the this is set previous to that. So I think I would use acts as opposed to episodes. And for my first film adaptation, I would call it Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And it would be Act 1, Order Revived, which kind of gives you a hint about what's going to be kind of taking place in there, with bringing Revan back into the Jedi Order. So Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Act 1, Order Revived. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd like that. It's different from episodes. Act is much more theatrical.
Hmm.
And maybe it's just because I've read a lot of the Shakespearean kind of covers of the Star Wars like saga, but I'm like, ooh, act. It's like I think it's cool. And Order Revived is a good one. I think I'm kind of getting. I'm gonna sound a lot like George Lucas here, but
Okay.
I I think I would call it Knights of the Old Republic, and then just kind of have the title.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say like episode one or have numbers or anything. It would just be Knights of the Old Republic, and then the name of the chapter.
Okay.
And I'm kind of really embracing like George Lucas's just like when he was naming the prequel trilogy, he's like, I'm going to call it the Phantom Menace. Like, deal with it.
Right.
Attack of the Clones, deal with it. And like, I love those titles, just like kind of old serials.
Sure.
So I would call it Knights of the Old Republic, The Mysterious Stranger,
Okay.
because your protagonist is kind of coming onto the scene. He doesn't know who he is. And that's also a kind of a big hint, on Terrace. It's like, ooh, the mysterious stranger. It's your nickname in the dueling ring.
Hmm.
And I just think it would be a fun title, kind of harkening back to the days of George Lucas. But like, I don't think any studio executive would go with that.
Go with that one.
So,
No, I like
yeah.
that one. I when I was trying to think of what I would call it, I really it was hard for me to get away from anything that was like awaken, because I think that's kind of a key part of at the very beginning of the game. That's literally what he's what Revan's doing on the ship is
Yeah.
waking up. But the Force Awakens already took that one, so I had to switch mine up to revived. So
The Force has a snooze button, I guess.
that's
Or I
right.
guess this canonically this would take place first. So
Yeah, there you go.
maybe the Force goes to sleep. I don't know. But what do you think about an opening crawl? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I am personally am one to kind of want to get away from it. It certainly is iconic and lived throughout the Skywalker saga, but I think that going forward that we should probably skip having one. And I think the way that I would get the film started off really could do so without having the opening crawl. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards no, or at least kind of reinterpret it for another age.
Hmm.
You don't want people to subconsciously think, like, oh, here we go again. Like, it's gonna be a Luke Skywalker or Rey or Anakin Skywalker story.
Right.
Like, the Skywalker saga is done, and I would hope the ad campaign would have hammered home that this is 4,000 years before everything else. But I kind of maybe some background like on the Star Wars opening crawl. It's like a conceit of Star Wars was it was going to be R2D2 and C3PO were telling the story
Hmm.
to other galaxies. That's kind of what the opening crawl was, and they were telling the story of the Skywalker saga. They were the ones that outlived everyone and told the story.
Hmm.
And it just kind of got me thinking. And I've also been reading Epic Continent, and it's just kind of talking about like all these different epics, like the Odyssey, the Kosovo Cycle, the Song of Roland, and Beowulf, and many other stories. And like it's just making me think of Knights of the Old Republic.
Hmm.
So I would maybe have like an orange a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, just to be like it's the same but different because it's a different color. And I mean, Star Wars, you always kind of want it to evoke Flash Gordon, hero's journey, fairy tales. But for Knights of the Old Republic, I feel like it would be inspired by the medieval era, like
Hmm.
the time when they would like tell epics and romances, and because I think KOTOR is an epic story. It has an epic love story, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like kind of a new song that kind of evokes like I don't know, like in a way kind of like what the music that inspired John Williams,
Hmm.
you know, like kind of like epic, like a hint of a romantic overture, you know, maybe you could have a chorus, maybe you could have a hint of star maps and constellations. I'm not really feeling a narrator, but what I'm kind of thinking is like maybe some imagery, like it's like Star Wars and it kind of merges from like 2D image to like space in the background, and it's kind of
Oh, okay.
like maybe like hints of like Star Wars constellations and like Mandalorian script and like maybe Jedi and Sith script. You know, maybe it could translate to something, you know, poetic and like kind of hints about the story. But yeah, I'm not feeling a narrator, but like just start it different. Like you're reading an epic tome from the days of like the medieval Star Wars. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, you could definitely have some fun playing around with different ways to kind of get the story started. Do some sort of like tapestry type art style kind of a thing, or like you mentioned, kind of drawing out the star maps and going through a little bit of the backstory. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of really interesting ways you could kick something off that would give you the information that you need to get into the movie without having it be the typical crawl that we see in the 9 Skywalker films.
Yeah. So we did ask our followers on Instagram,
Hmm.
should KOTOR movies have an opening crawl? 81% said yes, and then 19% said no. Here's a quote from Kai from Plex Armory. I find Star Wars properties without the crawl to be a bit jarring. I think KOTOR needs it too, just to set the universe, as it's pretty removed from the Star Wars universe that people have seen before. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree that there needs to be some sort of context set up because it is so far removed. I don't know that I would find it jarring. There wasn't a crawl in Solo. I didn't particularly find that jarring. I thought it was uh, kind of interesting to see a Star Wars film start in a different way. But yeah, I definitely agree with him that it needs to have some sort of uh, background information presented in some sort of way to get us set up before we just start out on the Endar Spire and you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. So I hope there would be a good ad campaign. So who knows? But Lorg from Patreon says, I would like to see the crawl, but maybe have different music. Uh, what kind of music would you like to hear? Would you like kind of the same?
Yeah, I would want to keep it in kind of those classical styles that John Williams had done for Star Wars. Running up to this one, so same kind of style. Um, Now we've seen like in The Mandalorian that we're able to get away from that styling a little bit, and it doesn't seem out of place. And some of the music in the Clone Wars, was quite different than it was in the film. So I think you have some room to kind of experiment with that a little bit. But I think for kind of this big epic trilogy, I would want it to have that same sort of tone that John Williams has brought to us for all those years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of thinking of Max Richter. He did the Four Seasons Recomposed, and Vivaldi was a composer who came up with the Four Seasons. So it's like if you listen to Max Richter, you can really get the feeling of the Four Seasons by Vivaldi, but it kind of like
Hmm.
makes it come alive a bit more. It's neoclassical, where Vivaldi was classical, and they're both great, but part of me was kind of thinking like, ooh, what if we got a composer like Max Richter who does to John Williams kind of like what Max Richter did to Vivaldi? Or I was watching Oblivion, and then you have M83, and they're a
Hmm.
great band, and I guess Daft Punk is broken up, but they did an excellent score for Tron Legacy. But yeah, I just think there's like some great composers out there who could kind of continue the trend of what they're doing with the Mandalorian and kind of like free up the soundscape for Star Wars. Like, you don't have to just be John Williams, you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah, no, definitely agree.
yeah. And then Ironic Designs says having a narrator.
Okay.
What do you think about a narrator?
I think that I am kind of on the same page as Ironic Designs here. We'll get into that a little bit, but I think that in place of a crawl in my adaptation, I would do it almost as a voiceover. So I think having a narrator is a pretty good option there. What do you think about a
Yeah.
narrator?
I mean, in Clone Wars, it worked. Is it Admiral Yularen who kind of has the same voice as the narrator? Like, it kind of feels more like a serial, and I'm like, oh yeah, a galaxy at war, you know? I guess I just don't want it to kind of retread the same steps of, like, Lord of the Rings, because it worked for Lord of the Rings, but I just wonder if by having a narrator, it kind of makes the audience kind of feel removed from what's happening. Like, oh, it happened so long ago, you know?
Right.
Like, even though it did happen a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but I just wouldn't want to feel like the story was already done in a way. But even though I guess it is, but
Right.
yeah.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. And then Ibrakdabra, oh, it's Ibrakdabraka. I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah. But they say maybe start off with the narrator who is telling this ancient legend to someone in the present.
Okay.
I guess I just would worry that, like, the present will always be 4,000 years later, and I kind of want to, even though it's a different time period, like, make it feel present, you know?
Yeah, I'd want it to be kind of completely detached. So, like I said, I'm okay with the narrator. I don't know if I would do it as like a retelling of a story from a long time ago, right? I would want it to all be placed in that particular era.
Yeah. Galaxy of Film says a different opening crawl style. Do you have any visuals you would like to see in a new opening crawl style?
Yeah, I think if you're going to do a different type of a crawl, I would almost want it to be more visual as opposed to words. Like I'd mentioned, sort of like artwork, like you'd have on like medieval tapestries, something like that, possibly. I don't know how you'd play out that story. That would have to be almost kind of a mix of, you know, kind of a storytelling and, you know, kind of this more ancient, you know, hieroglyphic and type of artwork. But something like that I could see. I don't know about doing other sort of like title card sort of things. But
okay. Whatever the opening crawl or whatever it is will fade into space and then we'll come onto the scene. How would you start the film? Would you start with the Endar Spire?
Yeah, so I actually would start a little bit before the Endar Spire. So we've just been talking a little bit about how we would do the crawl or not do a crawl. So I would actually have sort of a kind of a sweeping overview of these Jedi and Sith wars, kind of the last, kind of the waning moments of it, and you'd have a narrator, and it's going to be Bastila telling the story about the war and about how she was sent out to recapture, Revan to bring him back to the Jedi Order. And as it's kind of sweeping across, you're going to see her kind of from behind, standing over top of Revan, and it's going to kind of zoom in on him, and that's when we're going to see him wake up onto the Endar Spire. So I think that's how I would get the film started there.
Yeah, I guess I would just start with the Endar Spire kind of evoking a sinking ship.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I definitely would like to see. Well, I guess we'll get to that in the future, but I would like to see the Endar Spire kind of like a sinking ship. You're like, ooh, this is not good. You know, it's like where episode 4 kind of began with a pursued ship. It's like, ooh, this is bad. Like, we just had a nice opening crawl or whatever, you know, and then it's like, oh man, they are not having a good time. They are under attack.
And I think that's how, Revan's going to be kind of woken up from this sort of dream he's having, kind kind of Bastila kind of retelling the story is you're going to have, alarms going off. I'd see probably like Karth like busting into your room saying, "Hey, it's time to go. We got ships going down. Got to get out of here." So.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I would want to have Revan wake up, just maybe because it seems like in every sometimes when I just see it in scripts or books and it's like, oh, the narrator woke up, and it's like, oh, and then they look at themselves in a mirror. It's like, okay, I guess we're just doing this. But I guess part of why I'm on the fence about Revan waking up is because it kind of evokes a bond, and like he's literally searching for his identity. Or I guess not searching, but he does have issues pertaining to his identity.
Right.
So I'm like, maybe it could be like a nice symbolic, he's waking up, but I'm on the fence about that because in my mind, like, I don't believe Revan's been catonic this whole time. I believe he has been in his programmed identity at least a few months, maybe a few weeks.
Yep.
But I would definitely have Trask, who my fan cast is Leslie Odom Jr. would wake him up. So he's my fan cast, and then Trask will die, but in kind of like what I visualized the beginning of episode 3, a bit of a flashback, he would be back,
Oh, okay.
Kind of setting up how Bastila and Revan came to be where they are at the beginning of episode 1.
Right.
But then Karth, you find Karth, and then you crash on Terrace. You're asleep, and I think like sleep would be, I guess like dreams, sleep, and the unconscious would kind of pertain to the bond. Like kind of like Sleeping Beauty-esque,
Right.
So yeah.
That's kind of how I see their force bond. If you're playing through the game, you'll see Revan basically kind of sleeping and having these visions every time you're back on the Ebon Hawk. But I think that's how I would choose to kind of visually show the bond between Bastila and Revan, are through kind of these sleeping sort of shared force visions that they're having together.
Yeah, I would love to see. Maybe I'll just have to write it myself. Kind of a version of Sleeping Beauty that's kind of kind of mixed with Inception, kind of like
okay.
Have fun with fairy tales. I'll have to write it myself, but
there you go.
I think people can have fun with that, But a film inspiration for like kind of the Endar Spire spot is like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Black Pearl. It's like when the ship is sinking and it's like a battle, like they kind of evoke that, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, I'd see him and Karth, kind of making their way out to the bridge, and at that point I don't know if you'd have sort of one of your antagonists there. So I don't know if you'd have like maybe Darth Bandon would be on board, or I don't know if you'd want to have Darth Malak there, but I think you'd see someone maybe puts in a holo call to Darth Malak saying that Revan was here, but they escaped or something like that. Kind of before Revan and Karth would get into the escape pods and make their way off of the Endar Spire to get to the next location there.
Yeah, I think in the game, I mean, it's not shown who they discuss, but like when after Terrace is bombarded, Kara says, let's talk about this elsewhere, Darth Malak. But basically what they're saying is like, hey, there's literally Darth Revan running around, so like you didn't kill him. Like, so next time do better.
Do better,
so, yeah.
I don't know if that would be a good time to maybe mention Calo Nord if they know that they're going to be getting to Terrace, to kind of set up who will be having to deal with when we land on Terrace. So
yeah. So speaking of Terrace, what do you see Terrace as?
Yeah, so a little bit different from the game. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of Terrace that's going to have to end up on the cutting room floor, as they say, just because it's a huge part of the game. But when you're talking about making a film, you have to speed things up a little bit. So I actually see them crashing on sort of the mid-level of Terrace, get themselves sorted out and make their way into a cantina, and that's kind of where they get tipped off about that Bastila is being held kind of down in the sewer levels by the Black Volkers, is who it is in the game anyway, but she's being held down in the sewers, so Karth and Revan are going to have to kind of make their way down there, and I think that's when we also would meet Mission, is kind of right in this first opening section. In this cantina, she, might kind of follow us out of the cantina and say, "Oh, I have a friend that's down there. Let me come help you." And you kind of brush her off, but she tags along anyways.
Yeah. I do like the swoop race. Like, maybe it's just like I am really feeling like George Lucas, and I'm like, this needs, a swoop race. So, yeah. So I do like the swoop race, but Terrace would need to be streamlined a bit. I would say all the levels can appear, but kind of condense them. And then I would be like, Rackles, blink and you miss it. It's just there. It's not going to be a whole thing.
Right.
I would intersect the search for Bastila with the swoop race and just have T3M4 from the start. Maybe Karth can be like, here's Bastila's droid. She left it behind, like something like that. And then I would have the team up with Canderous early on.
Okay.
As the team goes down to the lower levels, there is a gang war with Mission and Zalabar in the lower city, and then they kind of just team up, and it's like, ooh, the swoop accelerator, the parts we need are down in the sewers, and then they go back up for the race, and then they win the race, and then once they have Bastila, the bombardment literally starts, like within minutes, Terrace is glassed. So you have the 3 levels, is Cool City, Tragedy. So,
yeah, I think if you send our characters on a mission to rescue Bastila and Zalbar, I think that can kind of take place at a swoop bike race. I don't know that we necessarily need to enter into it like you do in the game, but that could potentially be just where they're being held, like at the race.
Yeah.
So we do get to see it, even though we're not necessarily participating in it. But yeah, so we would kind of get those 2 back, and I think at that point is when, at least in my head, is when we would meet Canderous, and he would kind of give us a good tip on how to get off the planet. He's been trying to get off the planet. Tells us where the Ebon Hawk is, and then we're going to have to get into the Sith compound to get it released. So, and I think that's where we meet up with T3. I think maybe poor little droid is there in the Sith compound, and maybe Karth can reprogram him or get him activated, and he's going to help us steal the docking bay codes from the Sith compound, and that's how we're going to end up getting off of Terrace.
Yeah, I think there's not a whole lot of films that I would be able to specifically name that would kind of influence this, but like a lot of dystopias, not quite the young adult dystopias that kind of populated a lot of the mid 2000s,
Right.
But Metropolis, definitely. I feel like the creators of KOTOR were kind of evoking Metropolis. I think it's a film from 1926 or 28. It just kind of talks a lot about, like, there's different levels. It definitely inspired the look of Coruscant, and Terrace is a whole big city, too. I feel like Metropolis inspired it. I actually think Metropolis is, like, the first film to be classified as, like, I think a UNESCO thing. So, like,
oh, okay,
it was like a major deal. So it's kind of just like the people of the lower levels of the city kind of ruled over by people in the upper class, and
right.
I just really got like terrorist vibes when I was watching it. So
yeah, I'd like very similar to in the game. I think I would like, obviously the upper level to be clean, but I think actually all of the levels would look the same. They would just be just a little bit more decayed. So almost like, they kind of built a level and lived on it until, it got kind of dirty and messy, and so unsavory characters came in. So then they just built a new level on top of it, and that's how they kind of got this sprawling city. So I think it's going to look visually kind of constructed the same, on each level, but it just kind of gets dingier as you go down.
Yeah. I mean, like, Coruscant is inspired, is it neoclassical? I want to say it's a neoclassical architectural style that inspires it. It would be interesting if Terrace was inspired by Gothic,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of make it a bit different and
Change
be
it
like,
up,
ooh,
sure.
it's the medieval era, you know?
Right.
But that would be fun. That's just me being a nerd, and like not many people would notice that. But
Right.
but yeah. So the party gets off Terrace. Like, how would you describe Dantooine?
So you kind of land at the Jedi Temple there, and I think Dantooine's going to look kind of similar to the way we see like Yavin 4. It's just kind of a more forested area with just kind of, you know, this big temple sitting in it. Like if you've looked at like Aztec and Mayan constructions, is something kind of like that. Just, you know, almost into like a rainforest type of an area, but then, you know, just have these big, huge kind of stone temples and encampments built, and that's kind of, you know, visually at least how I see Dantooine.
Oh, that's a cool way of seeing it. I would say, like, on Dantooine, like, Revan's subconscious is awakening.
Okay.
You need to see him become a Jedi and forge a lightsaber, which would be, I think, literally the first time, like, in live action that you would see a lightsaber being made, like, in completion.
Right.
He'd have a purple lightsaber, you know. I think one thing I struggle with is, like, what is his drive, you know? To become a Jedi, what's in it for him? Because,
right.
like, I'm just thinking about it. It's like there's literally no money in it. Like, you can't have a family. Like, he was a soldier, and then he's just like, okay, sure.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, how much of him is the programmed identity? What's his identity? It is kind of hard because in Knights of the Old Republic 1, he didn't really have a personality. He's kind of just whatever, like, the player wants him or her to be.
Yeah, sure, right.
You know, he, and 100% Star Wars made the point that he didn't really have a character until Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, how much of that is carrying over, you know? So I guess that would be, I think you could find a way to give him a character that a lot of people could get behind, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, I think kind of the way that I would set that up. So after you land at Dantooine, Bastila is going to go and kind of have this closed door meeting with the Jedi Council that we actually get to see in the film, and they're, you know, talking about her, you know, having spent this time with Revan. You know, he was able to find her on Terrace to kind of talk to her about that and try to get kind of a level of trust with him and with her, and where their relationship is, and, you know, kind of where his kind of headspace is in terms of the Jedi. But I think we get him back into kind of more of the Jedi alignment. I think that maybe you have like a really awesome scene in like some sort of like Jedi archives that they have at this Jedi temple. Basila's in there, Revan goes in, and they're talking, and I think it would be really cool if she showed him like his broken lightsaber hilt, like Revan's lightsaber, and, you know, when he sees it and when he touches it, it kind of sparks a little bit of memories about him being, you know, a Jedi Knight at one point. But I do think at this point that his lightsaber is not going to work, so I think that we're going to get to see him reforge it, but I don't think that he's going to have it to use quite yet.
Yeah, I guess part of me is like a nerd, and I'd be like, he forges a new lightsaber because he's kind of forging a new path, new identity.
Right.
He isn't the Jedi he used to be. He's not the Sith he used to be. And I think it'd just be hilarious if he forges a new lightsaber that looks kind of like half like the old Jedi lightsaber hilt and then half like the Sith Jedi hilt, and then it's like, oh crap, like this could go either way, and the Jedi are kind of like,
right,
this could go either way, and it might be really bad and backfire. But I would see that the Jedi would want to send Revan and Bastila to the star map just to kind of be like, does this awaken anything in Revan? Maybe even Bastila?
Hmm.
you know? It's kind of like epic destiny, you know? Like, but I do see, like, Dantooine is where the quest is kind of unfurled for everyone. They're
Hmm.
given purpose. Like, it's a bit of a rest period on Dantooine. You kind of have a city tragedy, and then this will be the rest midpoint where you learn about the force of it all. It's Star Wars, you know? And then you'd have like a forest triumph, you know? So it kind of breaks
Hmm.
it up.
Yeah, you need kind of these slower paced, quieter moments to really start to get into any sort of like character development and things. You can't just keep going at a frantic pace through the whole thing, or you're not going to have time to explore any of these characters. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely agree. Now in the game, and I think too, in the way I would have the film, when I believe when you're uh, coming into Dantooine, Revan has one of his force visions. You know, as he's sleeping there in his bunk, and he sees kind of uh, like a door or something at the ruins where the star map is. So I think that could be another one of those kind of shared visions that maybe Bastila mentions to the Jedi Council, and that's what kind of prompts them to say, well, take them out there and see if you can figure out what that vision was trying to tell us.
Yeah. Any films you can think of to kind of inspire this section?
Nothing immediately comes to mind. Like I say it's just kind of slower,
Yeah.
more paced. Yeah, I'm struggling to think of a good comparison, but yeah, and any kind of these big epic tales. I know like Lord of the Rings is really good about having kind of these slower kind of set pieces where the characters just kind of are sitting down to talk, and I think it would be kind of in the same sort of vein as something like that.
I did like King Arthur Legend of the Sword,
Mm.
but one scene I wish, or maybe a few series of scenes I wish we could have seen, was like when King Arthur goes to train on an island and he has to fight all these monsters. Like, we didn't really get that. And I'm like, I want that, you know? But
Sure.
like with Jedi, you know, like forging a sword and like getting the quest, you know? I'm like, I want that. So
Hmm.
that's what I would want to see.
Yeah.
So
Now my big question for you on Dantooine. So in the game, at least, we meet Juhani there. She's sort of out, kind of in this, I don't know, sort of these ruined things. That's where you run into her. How do you think we meet Juhani, and what are is the outcomes? Do you think that there's a fight, or is she just kind of down on her luck, depressed, and Bastila tells her to get back to the Jedi Council and let them sort of deal with you, or how do you think we meet her in a film?
I would say have her fall to the dark side kind of distressed. Or maybe it wouldn't have to be full dark side, or at least just like kind of like you could say like maybe she's having a panic attack, you know, like the
Right.
the
Sure.
the force equivalent of that, like. And I would preferably want Revan to be alone, and it's like this is kind of his test of character, you know, and
Hmm.
he spares her, and maybe like Bastil is kind of far off and can sense it, and it's like, oh, he's making the same choice I made, you know,
Right.
and like perhaps like things are progressing, you know, kind of well, like, and he's a good person, you know.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have Juhani join the crew right away just because I think the Ebon Hawk might get a bit crowded, but I would definitely have her be a major presence in the first movie, and then I foresee her maybe like appearing in a few holograms,
Okay.
like in the second um, episode. Well, I guess we're not calling them episodes, but you know what I mean. Like
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
the midpoint of the cycle. But I would have her be the one, maybe teaming up with Candace to rescue the crew from the Leviathan, and then she would replace Bastila and be a major presence in the third movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we done things on Kashyyyk like we discussed last episode. How do you kind of see this part unfolding, and are there any films you would kind of want to echo?
Yeah. I think just visually, so Lord of the Rings about 100 times now, but kind of have the Kashyyyk, the village section kind of look like Lothlorien, just really kind of ornate carvings, handmade, big like banquet tables and things like that, just kind of real beautiful. And then the Shadowlands would be, a darker, much creepier, kind of a misty, foggy sort of a thing, just very damp and mysterious looking. But yeah, I think you're going to land up in the village. This is going to be kind of our first run in with the Zerka Corporation there, and they're going to have kind of a large presence. So not paying any sort of respect to this this history and the civilization there, and we know that we need to get to the Shadowlands because I think Revan's going to have another one of these kind of shared force things where he's going to see the star map and he's going to realize that it's down in the Shadowlands. So that's where they need to go. But to get to the Shadowlands, I think that they're going to need to get permission from the village chief, who is Zalbar's brother. And so, Zalbar can't go see him. He's supposed to be banished. So I think you get Bastila and Karth, and I actually have Giovanni coming along. So I think you get those three kind of going off to see Zalbar's brother, and then, everyone else. So Revan, Mission, and Zalbar are going to kind of sneak their way down into the Shadowlands. So you have diplomacy going on up top and a little bit of kind of espionage going on down below.
Yeah. I see Kashyyyk kind of mirroring Terrace, divided into three sections. You kind of have the Zerka, kind of more, kind of like the Empire and the CIS, kind of trying to usurp nature, like kind of technology over nature, which is a big theme in Star Wars, but kind of be like 4,000 years before version,
Right.
Then have the Wookiee level, but maybe like before they reclaim their sovereignty, like maybe have it kind of whitewashed and stripped of its culture. So then when everything is kind of made right in the end, like you get more of a feel of their culture, and you see that it's thriving and things are returning and like how they should be. And then the Shadowlands kind of be like, it is dark, but I guess there's beautiful aspects to it, like just kind of like the extremes of nature, And then I'm really cultured, and I'm just referring to Pirates of the Caribbean and all those kind of films, But at least I did refer to Metropolis. But
that's
with Kashyyyk, I'd want to evoke The Lion King and Black Panther. I just think they're good films. They're great,
Sure, yeah.
And Zalbar reclaims his homeland, and then Revan and Bastila claim part of their quest, and Revan kind of unknowingly is like kind of reclaiming his identity slowly but surely. And then I would love to see like the battle at the end. Maybe there's a battle kind of taking place like kind of the lower levels of Kashyyyk, and then kind of like the upper levels, kind of like the upstairs and downstairs sequence that you see in Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and the Burj Khalifa. If we wanted to get fun, we could even like maybe have someone climb the side of a tree for some reason,
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think that this would be a good time to maybe see Bastila using her battle meditation skill. So maybe, after we've gathered up Jolie and gotten the star map piece, we're, having, like you said, a big fight kind of down below in the Shadowlands, and Bastila can kind of tell that they're in trouble. So maybe you see her sort of utilize her battle meditation to kind of, link up with Revan and help him out. And that fight sort of in the midst of all of this chaos, she kind of takes a moment to do that.
Yeah, rather than just hear about battle meditation all the time, you want to see it.
Right. And I think you could play it up too, as, Revan, is still a little bit foggy about what's going on. He might not necessarily understand what is happening exactly, but he can, sense that Bastila is helping them in some capacity at least. So
part of me is in love with the idea of Bastila fighting Darth Bandon, like double lightsaber to double lightsaber, too, just like showing like her doing battle meditation to save her friends, but then there's a little bit of kind of darkness, unresolved issues kind of seeping in,
Right.
and it's like, I think she kind of ended him a little bit, too aggressively, Maybe fans would get mad if she kind of did both, but I'm like, just deal with it. It's part of the story.
Right.
So.
Yeah, you could maybe even have, if she does square off with Darth Bannon at this point, he could even make mention about how he can, feel the, turmoil inside of her if we're gonna, kind of liken it to other, Fallen Jedi stories, but at least make some sort of reference that he can tell that, that there's a wavering inside of her.
Yeah, and she's not being honest, maybe keeping secrets, maybe saying that without saying that, like, because you want, like, I mean, I think I've mentioned the Knights of the Old Republic book by Alex Kane a few times on the podcast and the Instagram page, but in the book, he mentions that one of the writers said, like, you want at least 10% of the audience to guess the twist. You don't want everyone to be able to put it together, but you want, like, at least some people to be like, well, that's obvious, So you want some hints.
You could probably get really clever with the way that, if something like that were to go on where he could say it and it would almost come off as him saying it and it sounds like it's about Revan, but really it's about Bastila.
Yeah. So it can, like, work both ways. That would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I would like to see in this movie is the trio of Knights of the Old Republic, Revan, Karth, and Bastila. Let the trio interact, In the Terra section, you could have Revan and Karth kind of working together, and then you have Dantooine. It would be kind of like Revan and Bastila focused. And then on Kashyyyk, you I would say maybe have Karth and Bastila work as a team.
Right.
Yeah, like the upstairs sequence, this could be subject to change,
Sure.
You can switch people around. Upstairs would be like Bastila, Karth, and T3. Then downstairs would be Revan, Mission Zalbar. They'd run into Jolie. And then free agent Canderous. I would say maybe he could be the messenger between two sides. Maybe he could get a jetpack and be like, kind of like do jetpack and like kind of like go up the tree or something for a cool epic scene, Like, I make my own high ground.
He could definitely kind of play on both levels, right? So
yeah,
sort of, run sort of a messenger kind of between the two, and end up getting stuck in fights along the way or something. So
yeah, and like maybe he could kind of have a little hint of his KOTOR 2 arc of like gathering Mandos, like. He was going to leave Solo on Dantooine, but here's where they're going. And maybe he's scared. Like, maybe someone put a bounty on him and someone from Terrace escaped. And, like, it's like, oh, I kind of really made a lot of people mad, And, like, maybe he needs security or something. But the overall arc of Kashyyyk is you reclaim Kashyyyk from Zerka for the Wookiees,
For the Wookiees, that's right. And now we have Zalbar. He's back with his family, and now he's in a position where he can lead the tribe. Yeah.
And I'd say, like, the star map quest would become a bit secondary, which is, like, probably what a Jedi should do,
Right.
And I would definitely increase Zalbar's role, but I would say, like, maybe the star map, like, after Kashyyyk has been reclaimed, they could find it, and, like, maybe have a little bit of foreshadowing. Like, just kind of being like, this is kind of, like, sketchy, right?
Right, yeah.
And then I'm really feeling like episode 1 or episode 2 today. I don't know why. But I would say the last shot I'd want to have is the Ebon Hawk crew kind of celebrating Zalbar being put in as chief. Like, maybe like Zalbar has like a crook and flail or something some cool iconography to be like, I'm a chief, But then I'd have the ending shot kind of evoke episode 4, episode 1, but like I think seriously episode 1,
Okay.
So
Yeah, just a big party going on in Kashyyyk there.
Yeah. What would your last shot be?
Yeah, so actually it's kind of similar. So it's going to be, kind of Zalbar. There's some sort of maybe ceremony or big, kind of feast, up in the village with him and missions there and kind of wrapping up that, she's sort of accepted that, Zalbar is her family and, she's part of his tribe now. So it kind of ends there. But I think the way that my first film would end is you'd actually have Jolie meeting Bastila and he kind of pulls her to the side and she's just saying something along the lines of, I don't know what we'll do when he realizes what he is. And it kind of pans over and you see Revan and he's looking at the broken lightsaber hilt that she gave him back on Dantooine.
Ooh. Yeah. That would be really cool. I guess I don't know. I it would be kind of fun if like Karth is looking happy for the first time in a while,
Right, yeah.
And maybe like it's like, okay, I see you guys. Like, I don't know. Episode 1 is interesting because it's like Padme smiles at Anakin, and it's like, okay, But like, what if like they're smiling at each other, Revan and Bastila?
Yeah,
So.
I could see Karth and Canderous, throwing a few back and trading war stories there, and everyone, like I said, everyone's kind of having a good time for a minute before it's time to double down on this quest. So
yeah, before we take a quick break, I just wanted to read this fun review from Apple Podcasts. It comes from I Really Like Cereal. Hopefully he's not a serial killer. It says, great podcast. Love the new direction episodes are going. So, yeah, the podcast has been going great. So, you've been knocking it out of the park, Brian. So
awesome.
Thank
you.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the review. Okay, so we've sort of talked about all the places that we are going to go and kind of, the overall sort of themes that we want to see on those places. Why don't we talk a little bit about the characters and kind of what we want to see out of them in, our first film adaptation here. So obviously the big one is Revan. Cassia, how do you see Revan's kind of story playing out here in this first episode?
Yeah, I would see Revan as a he in our proposed trilogy. Like, nothing against female Revan. It would be a cool story if it was female Revan, but I'm just going with what was established just to kind of keep things kind of a little consistent. But I would say if there were a movie trilogy with the male Revan, just like maybe have like a graphic novel with the female Revan, or at least something.
Oh, okay.
So
that would be interesting.
All the fans are happy,
Mm-hmm.
Who is the character? Like, I don't know if I would see him as good, recovering bad person, or gray. Like, but I just don't see him as a Luke,
right?
Han, or an Anakin. But I would see a lot of studio executives just trying to make him a Han 2.0. I think he has a reprogrammed identity, is steady, and it's steady until he comes upon Bastila and star maps. But we'd see more confusion in the second iteration,
Yeah.
I would say his reprogrammed identity is maybe like it's him pre-Mandalorian Wars, not his personality before then. So it would be kind of the same, but just kind of without like the baggage. It's like he's getting a do-over.
Right.
So like maybe it's kind of like rather than like the Jedi Council is like, you're gonna be, this person, this person, this person. It's kind of like they're stripping away like the baggage, and it's like he's kind of being reborn, But
right.
I'd say his arc is become a Jedi and a hero and deal with a Force bond,
Mm-hmm.
And the Force, like, it comes back to him once he comes in contact with Bastila. Like a trickle and then kind of all at once. Almost
okay.
the same power. And then at the end of the movie, maybe it's like he's a little bit below Bastila in power. Like, but then by, I would say, episode 2, they're kind of the same, and then he kind of surpasses her towards the end. But that's what I see.
Yeah. Yeah, I see him kind of the same way actually as you. I don't think that I would lean quite so heavily on the amnesia aspect of it, but I think you're going to see him kind of going through this story, and he's definitely not all there in terms of his memories and the way he should feel. So I think that it's important to keep him kind of vague in that sense, especially kind of for the big reveal, to come later. So just trying to kind of piece things together and figure out his role in all of this, and to that end, I think that he's going to be pretty skeptical of Bastila and Karth, kind of hold them at arm's length almost a little bit, just until he can kind of wrap his head around what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, so next up in our characters that we're going to meet in the film is going to be Karth. What sort of characterizations do you see Karth going through in this film?
I see him as someone who's dealing with losing his family and trust in someone he trusted. Like, I guess I could see it as like someone betrayed someone. Maybe like it was like in real life, like you could say like the same situation would be like your best friend, like was driving, drunk, and then it's like you lose like your wife and your kid because of their decision they made, like they were giving someone a ride or something. So like he's kind of dealing with the most human things, I would say. I'd say like he kind of has to find trust, like a grudging trust in his new team, and like it's almost like he's finding a new family, but he doesn't want to kind of move on because like what if like
right, sure,
his new family lets him down, So that's what I see.
Yeah, I think a lot of that. I think that Karth's always going to be the good soldier. He's there to serve under Bastila, so whatever she says goes. And I think you're going to get to explore that, especially in the first part of the film. Before they're reunited with Bastila. She isn't there to give him guidance. So how he's going to deal with that. But yeah, then definitely just a lot of unresolved guilt about his wife and his son that he's going to make mention to, but I don't think we really are going to get into too much of how that's affecting him. I mean, well, obviously we'll know that it's affecting him somewhat, but I don't think we're going to get into sort of in too deep with it here in this first film iteration.
Yeah.
And then how about Bastila, everyone's favorite Jedi?
I think she would be a hard character to get right. But like to me, I think she's one of the more interesting characters, and I think like whoever would play her would have a whole lot of fun doing so. Power-wise, I kind of say she's like an Obi-Wan level. Like I don't think she would be quite like a Yoda or like Mace Windu level, but like if you remember, like Obi-Wan still beat a lot of people. Like it just kind of depends on the matchup,
Right.
I think she's an Anakin who tries to pass herself off as an Obi-Wan, and she's kind of been sheltered by the Jedi Council, and she's basically fighting a war for the Jedi Council. And I think it's kind of like the Jedi Council is like a parent or an institution like she really believes in, even if she like has doubts, and it's like she's trying to prove herself,
Sure, yeah.
And yeah, like so she would have to learn to work as a team member rather than like kind of appointing herself like team leader, like it's kind of like Ahsoka learning the realities of command, I would say.
Right.
But Bastila is still kind of keeping a secret from the whole team. So it's like she's kind of, on one hand, learning to open up, but she's kind of like maybe clenching a fist with the other, like, so it's like you have an interesting like yin yang,
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool.
Yeah, so for me, for Bastila, I had written down here on my notes that she, on one hand, is very arrogant about how good of a Jedi she is and how good the Jedi are, but on the other hand, she's very naive about both of those things too, right? So they're sending her out on these, super important missions. She's really powerful, Force user, and you can especially explore this in the Dantooine piece, when she's meeting with the council, that even though she's sort of doing these deeds, they don't necessarily trust her, or trust her with sort of more information than they want to give with her. And then she's going to have to be sort of purposefully vague with Revan about who he really is and what he's really doing there and how he really got there. And I think, at least in the way that I kind of closed out the film, she's going to get sort of called out on it by Jolie, and I think that could be really interesting to finally have someone to call her out on some of these things, because she's only had experience with Karth, who will sort of bend over backwards to do whatever she says, and then Revan, who's sort of oblivious to what's going on. So
yeah, and I would see her as a Jedi Padawan. What would you see her as?
Yeah, probably a Jedi Padawan. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because, like, she has, done some of these more important missions, and maybe that's just something that the council is sort of holding over her head, sort of stringing her along because they know how powerful she is and, all of these things that she can do. So it's, sort of like dangling a carrot in front of her, go get Revan, and then, we can talk about you being a master. Oh, okay, well, now, have to deal with Karth and Revan, do that, and then, okay, now we'll go get the star maps, and then we'll, come back and address it. So I think maybe they just sort of kind of keep hanging that out there. But yeah, I think on some sort of Padawan level, or whatever we would be calling it, this far back into the past of the Jedi Order.
Yeah, those are good points.
All right. Well, next up, we're going to meet Mission on Terrace. How do you see Mission's character being portrayed in a film adaptation?
So I see her arc is like she has to let go of the past, and I wouldn't have Griff appear. I think it would just kind of make things a little too busy, and just kind of realize, like, I've been ghosted. He's never coming back,
Right.
And just kind of embrace the found family she has with Zalbar on Kashyyyk, and she'll be their number one defender, Huni D, who I had on for the Kashyyyk episode, he actually made a really cool piece of Zalbar, and if you look at his armor, it has Mission on it, and it's like, I kind of just see them as a good team. They're Fireforged friends, and
yeah.
Terrace literally gets destroyed, so it's like the past is that the old world has ended, and the new world kind of the world of her being an adult with her new family, like that's how I see her arc.
Right. Yeah, I think Mission, as a character, I think she's always tries to be really helpful. She's going to come across as pretty street smart, and I think she's going to be a little bit humorous. I think that she kind of uses that as a mechanism to deal with times when she's afraid, like when we're trying to get Zalbar rescued, times like that when she's afraid of what's going to happen and what she might not be able to do. I think that she kind of uses humor to cover that up. And yeah, like you mentioned about Griff, her brother, she's always sort of trying to figure out how to get back to, or why she can't get in touch with him. And I think over the course of the film, she's going to realize that she has a much better brother in Zalbar right with her the whole time. And I think that storyline is going to kind of play out by the time we end this first film onto Kashyyyk, when she realizes that Zalbar is her real family. So
yeah.
All right, we've learned a little bit more about some of the crew of the Ebon Hawk. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the crew of the Ebon Hawk podcast, a great place to do that is over on our Patreon. We're posting scripts, behind the scenes information, taking topic suggestions, and we've started posting Patreon exclusive episodes. Check out the link in our Instagram bio or go to patreon.com/Ebon Hawk podcast for more information. All right, so we've found mission and we have to go rescue Zalbar. So we have Zalbar in the party now. What sort of character arc do we see Zalbar having in this first film?
I see Zalbar as someone who has to overcome past trauma and mistakes, kind of reclaim their place, and kind of make restitution and embrace his bigger family and his tribe, like Terrace's destruction in a way is Kashyk's rebirth, in this film. So that's how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think you'll see, and especially kind of on some quieter moments, maybe aboard the Ebon Hawk, going to Dantooine and then onto Kashyyyk, that Zalbar, he's big and strong and can sort of face anything that comes with him, but he's really afraid of going back to Kashyyyk, of facing his past and being cast out. That's really important to him and his culture, but sort of he's indebted to Revan and the rest of the crew from the Ebon Hawk, so he's gonna sort of face these fears and go back to Kashyyyk and face his demons, and then ultimately he's gonna end up back reunited with his family, back with his village, there with Mission, who is his family now, and put in a position of power back in Kashyyyk. He's gonna sort of face his demons and come out on the top.
Yeah. And I see Zalbar and Mission, like Kashyyyk would be their stepping off point, but I do see them coming back for the third film, the Starforge battle, and they could maybe be fighting like in space or like on the Starforge, but it wouldn't be a goodbye forever. So.
Yep. Yeah, just goodbye for now. But I do think that Mission and Zalbar probably have the most sort of fulfilled character arcs. I think the rest of these, we'll have time to build in the future films. But I think since we've decided to sort of end their piece of the story here on Kashyyyk, it's important to sort of give them enough time to kind of flesh out the way they're feeling and how they're dealing with it. So,
yeah.
Well, if we're going to make it off of Terrace, we're going to need the help of our Mandalorian friend Canderous. So, what do you think Canderous is going to get up to in this film? How's he going to be portrayed?
I kind of see him as someone who's lost. His first life's path is over, and then he kind of just doesn't know what his second path is, so it's kind of like he's kind of just stuck in place. I see him as someone who represents war veterans,
Mm-hmm.
Like, he has to learn how to do more than wallow in the past or kind of seek comfort or distractions. He has to learn to embrace his new potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his mission, kind of combining his arc here with Knights of the Old Republic 2, is build a better Mandalore with the Mandalorians. Like, he's going to gather his people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, Canderous, he comes off as kind of gruff and kind of quiet, and he is really using, Revan and company to sort of make his way off of Terrace. Be it that, he's ran into some bad guys or he needs to get somewhere else, but he's going to decide to stay with the Ebon Hawk crew just kind of for the sake of keeping busy. And sort of his character and his demeanor is that almost kind of similar to Han Solo in the sense that he would have you believe that he doesn't really like anyone and he doesn't really trust anyone. But I think we're going to get glimpses of him through the film that show that he, is going to be trustworthy and kind of have the backs of everyone else on board as we go through this film.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. And on Dantooine, we meet up with Juhani, What do you think about her? How's her story going to play out in this first film?
I just find it interesting that Revan saved her during the Mandalorian Wars, and then he saves her again on Dantooine. So I think some things just history kind of repeats itself, and I kind of just like see Juhani as someone in a crisis who's helped out. And I can't remember which episode. I think it was 45. Ironic Designs described her character beautifully. Like, she represents the LGBTQ community, and she struggles because she wasn't accepted. But Revan shows her mercy and compassion, and because of that, she overcomes the dark side. And like I mentioned, like, I don't want an overcrowded Ebon Hawk. So I was gonna have her come back onto the scene in episode 2 with Canderous, and she'll take Bastila's spot and be a prominent figure in episodes 3. So she'll have a role in each of the films, but I just wonder if like the Ebon Hawk would be a bit too busy in episode 1.
Yeah. I mean, there's some kind of natural ways you could bring her back into the story. So maybe even before they get to the Leviathan, she might be able to be sent out by the council to sort of meet up with the party to do whatever at that point. But yeah, I think like you said, it does kind of get a little bit crowded with all the characters. So yeah, I would be okay with her staying on Dantooine too, I think. But as far as her kind of story arc for this goes, I think you said it really well, right? That she was sort of, forgiven and spared by Revan a couple of times. And I think that's really important to her because she's, really struggling with her flirtations with the dark side and sort of her behavior. And I also think that she probably is going to look up to Bastila a lot as sort of the model Jedi. So I think she's going to always trying to be doing her best to look good in front of Bastila. So I think that would be interesting. And I also think that she's going to end up learning a lot from Jolie, but not in this film. So that's going to have to wait for later.
Yeah, and I think a great lesson that Juhani teaches us is that past struggles don't doom you. Redemption is possible. And to exemplify the good examples in your life, like, you don't have to just repeat the bad examples you come across.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Jolie, he's the last one to come aboard the Ebon Hawk here. So we don't get a super long time with him, because by the time we meet him, we're about ready to check out the star map and have a crazy battle and a party on Kashyyyk. But what do you think about Jolie's character here for the time we get to spend with him in the first film?
Yeah, I see him as someone who's gone through a tragic life. Kind of more Obi-Wan than Yoda, I would say. He's someone who has to get back into the game after tragedy, heartbreak, and failure. And that's a bigger deal than I think a lot of us think about,
Right.
Like, he was kind of content to kind of just, I guess, like, end his days on Kashyyyk, and it's like one last adventure, it's not something he ever predicted. He kind of has to get back into the world of Jedi and Sith, like, after a big galactic war, he's like, I have to do it again, and what was it for? I see him kind of like, in the back of his mind, he's like, I'm not sure if I meant to guide Revan or put down Revan, but Revan has passed my path for a reason, and it's not just so I stay on Kashyyyk, I got to see this through, whatever the Force wills.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the same notes there from Jolie had sort of, all of this loss and mistakes that he's made. So he's going to have to atone for those. And I think that he's going to get to have that chance with Juhani, as she had, sort of, at least kind of dipped her toe into the dark side. So I think that he's going to see her as kind of a second chance to be a teacher to a young Jedi, and I think that that's going to be good for him. Like I said, I don't think we're going to get to explore that, really in this first film, but I do think that he's going to play an important part in Revan's character development because he's going to be a good sounding board for him because he's only going to be getting information fed, one-sided information from Bastila. So I think that he'll be sort of a good counterpoint to what she's telling him is, Revan spends the next film sort of trying to figure out who he is.
Yeah. I guess, like, Bastila kind of regurgitates Jedi Council dogma, and I think that Jolee is a bit more of the experienced, kind of balanced version, and then Revan will kind of be, I think, a synthesis,
Right.
of those, maybe lean more towards Jolee, but I also think, like, Bastila is going to get a little bit evened out, like not as extreme as things kind of progress, but but yeah, so if I were a studio executive, I'd be like, I accept your pitch. This is amazing. Like, let's make this.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, it's really exciting to sort of wrap up this first film and kind of go through the different locations and kind of how we would envision seeing those play out. So at the end of Act 1 or Chapter 1 or Episode 1 or whatever we decide that we're going to title this thing.
Maybe Obi-Wan 1,
Yeah, there you go.
That would work. So, yeah, let us know what you would want to name it, and we'll close out. And you can find us on Instagram at Ebonhawk Podcast.
And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram. It's at astro_droid_. The Ebon Hawk can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as everywhere else that Anchor Podcasts are distributed. Subscriptions, reviews, and shares help us out.
Our intro and outro themes were composed by Alistair Scheuerman at alistairsounds.wixsite.com/Alistair Sounds. Our transition music was composed by Christian Walker at christianwalkermusic.com. This episode of the Ebon Hawk Podcast has been brought to you by Nikki Dog from Patreon. May the Force be with you. We will be back soon. Bye for now.